going on, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of JaAR. JaAR, for those of you that may be new, stands for Joe
and Amy
Review, and this is our pseudo-weekly show where we review the Magic stories. And I say pseudo-weekly because we'll see how much longer it goes until there are more stories to review. But this week we are here for not exactly a story, kind of not, but at least an article with the Planeswalker's Guide to Dominaria by Roy Graham and Ethan Fleischer. So this obviously coming on the tails of us finishing reviewing the Dominaria United stories. And if you missed our reviews of those stories, you can click up there in the top corner to go check out the playlist of our reviews, because we did review all 5 of the main stories and all 5 of the side stories. So you should definitely go check that out. We had opinions overall, for sure, positive and negative about these stories. And honestly, I think that the same is going to be said about this Planeswalker's Guide. But my quick review at the top is that if you want to know about Dominaria, if you want to know about Dominaria United and the things that are relevant to the story, this is obviously the thing to read. And it costs very little time investment from you. And you get to look at some cool cards in the process that, I mean, if you've played the set, you know what they are, but still. But yeah, that's my quick review at the top.
Okay. Mine is, I liked this a lot. Like, better than most Planeswalker's guides, I think.
Okay.
Maybe it's because a plane like Dominaria has so much going on. There's
Sure.
like a lot of diversity in just the different types of places that exist, and, you know, the different people that exist too, right?
Sure. And it's like a lot more fleshed out kind of a thing because it's been around for so long. And
yeah, and there's like less cohesion, whereas like nowadays when they create a plane, they're like, okay, this is the theme of the plane, and that's the only theme, right?
Sure.
Whereas Dominaria has a multitude of different themes.
yeah, and it's also the kind of thing where it's like, you know, a lot of times because it's easier to do this when you create a new plane, for example, it's like all of the black creatures are this, and they're localized to this area. All of the red creatures are this, and they're localized to this area. That's not really what they did here. I mean, they talked about elves and stuff, but like the Keldans are, or at least Rada that they talked about from Keld, is red and green. Miria, who they talked about from Yavimaya, is red and green. And like, so both of them are red-green creatures, but they're from drastically different parts of the world, and their lives are so different. So yes, I think that's a point well taken as well.
Yeah.
So anyway, those are our quick reviews up at the top. If that makes the Planeswalker's Guide sound interesting to you, and you've either not had a chance to read it or want to refresh your memory, the top link in the description down below will take you right to it. Because unlike, I'll get on my soapbox for a minute, unlike the stories, I said this is a story, but it's not a story. Like, it helps you understand the story of Dominaria United, but for whatever reason, they don't want to put it in the story section. They never do. They never have, to my recollection, but it's just not there. And you absolutely could easily do it. Go back and look at Kamigawa Neon Dynasty, where they had the saga stories in one section. They had the manga, or the comic, in another section, all under the story tab. So you can't tell me you can't put another tab that just says Planeswalker's Guide. You absolutely can do it. It would be very easy to do. And I don't understand why they don't put it amongst their story, because even in the Planeswalker's Guide, they're like, oh, do you want to know more? Go read the story. And they give you a link to the story. So, like, put it with your stories. If you want it in your
that don't make sense.
If you want it in your featured section of your archives, do that too. Why can't it be in 2 places? Is that against the rules? It shouldn't be. You can make the rules. You're your own company. So, I've never understood why this isn't with the stories. I think it's ridiculous and stupid, but here we are. And there are other things that we have talked about a multitude of times with Planeswalker's Guides that we will get to when we get to the full review itself, but just wanted to let you know, to remove as many barriers as possible for you having to go look this up yourself, just go to the top link in the description down below. We'll help you out in that regard. And then, of course, we would love it if you would come back here and join us to give your thoughts and opinions, either comparing and contrasting them to ours or just something that we didn't necessarily talk about. We want to hear from you. That's what the comment section down below is for. Give us your opinions. We would love to hear from you. Before we get on to the rest of the review itself, thank you for being here. We really appreciate it. Please don't forget, while you are here, it helps us out immensely if you would subscribe and ring that bell It will allow you to get notifications whenever any of our videos come out if you want to see more things from us, including more JaARs in the weeks to come, and when the new stories come out as well. And we are live every Monday and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern right here on this channel. Mondays, if you're a fan of Magic the Gathering, we play MTG Arena, mostly whatever the newest limited format is. And then on Fridays, we play whatever video game we happen to be playing at the time. This Friday, aka the day after this video comes out, we are going to be continuing our playthrough for Spooky Month of Eternal Darkness Sanity's Requiem for the GameCube. Amy and many of our other viewers have never seen this game before, and yet it is one of my absolute favorites, so I encourage you to come join us for that. And last but not least, we have other channels, Video Games for All and Gluten Free for All. Links down in the description box below. Again, ring the bells there as well. So, on to the full review itself. Sorry for the interruption, but thank you for bearing with us on that. The Planeswalker's Guide starts here with an overview of where Dominaria is now, based on where it has come from. Makes perfect sense. It was a nice little kind of summarization of, again, where we've been, where we're going, etc. I liked it quite a bit. I thought it was, again, like you said, really allows the plane to be a lot more fleshed out. You get a lot of, you feel a lot more of a familiarity with it because of that, which is super helpful. And again, whether that means that you are kind of a Dominaria veteran or a newbie, right? It's still helpful to read that little recap to be like, oh, okay, yep, either I knew that already or, oh, cool, that's cool information to know.
Like a piece of hair that is tickling my face that I can't brush away. I don't know where it is. It's just like...
Just going crazy over there?
Yeah. Where is it?
So, I thought this was kind of funny. We talk about New Archive, right? New Archive is something that was discussed pretty heavily in this set, I believe, compared to other Dominaria-based sets. And it mentions that Argivia, the capital city, was rebuilt after being destroyed by the Phyrexians as, quote, the greatest fortification in all Dominaria.
Yeah.
Yet, it was the place that was overrun with Phyrexians when the Planeswalkers were there, where the Weatherlight literally had to come fly in and fly them away to save them. So, a lot of good the fortification did for you. Sten sucks.
Yeah.
Moving on.
Wow. This is... I feel like the quality of this video has fallen.
I mean, you're welcome to add your points in there. I just, like, what, I mean, do you have anything?
No.
Okay.
Sten sucks, I guess.
Sten sucks. He sure does. Next is the sleeper agents. So this talks about the sleeper agents. It's kind of the last thing that they talk about, which makes sense, right? You talk about, like, the providence of the plane and how great everything is. Oh, by the way, there are sleeper agents. Okay, bye. Right? Like, I get it. And it says, what they talk about with the sleeper agents still doesn't answer some of the questions that we have had about the sleeper agents, right? It mentions that there's a signal that the sleeper agent receives, which then activates them, and then they do the bidding of their kind of Phyrexian overlord, or whatever you want to call it. But it doesn't answer my questions of, like, a Johnny lies to them and says that he, like, didn't fight Phyrexians, but Karn sees him fighting Phyrexians when he scries on him. So why would a Johnny lie if he hasn't been activated yet? Because we know when a Johnny gets activated, it's in the 5th main story. We just reviewed it last week. So why does a Johnny lie if he doesn't know that he is a sleeper agent? We asked that question when the lie happened, which was, I believe, main story 4, I think. Also,
because inconsistencies.
Also, Sten seemingly leads them into a trap.
Yeah.
Leads them into the fortified tower where they're all trapped with a Phyrexian. And him as a Phyrexian as well, but still. So, why? Why does he do that if he's not a sleeper agent? Like, I guess you could argue that that is just incompetence, but again, a lot of these stories early on kind of have all of the planeswalkers and, like, Joda, like, planeswalkers and legendary creatures, have to be complete morons to allow the story to occur, which is lazy writing and not really great characterization for these ancient wise beings. And we talked about that, we complained about that, but I just don't understand why Sten, a newcomer, just randomly gets to say to all these planeswalkers and, again, centuries-old people, oh yeah, let's go here. And they're all like, yes, let's blindly trust you, guy that we just met today. Oh crap, you walked us into a trap? Who could have ever foreseen? Like, come on, right? Again, like I said, that's just...
Especially when there are sleeper agents afoot.
It's just lazy writing, lazy storytelling.
Yeah.
It was very frustrating. But... Again, like I said, the way that they talk about it, in fact, I think I wrote this quote down. It's not an exact quote, but it says that when somebody is kidnapped to be completed, they are then returned from whence they'd come, unaware of what had happened. And then they're activated whenever they get that signal. So then why does a Johnny lie? He has no reason to lie if he is completely acting as he normally would, right? Because he is not doing so, unlike Karn. Karn lies to try to suss out who the sleeper agent is.
Right.
Ajani is not doing that. So why does Ajani lie and say that he lost track of the Phyrexians when Karn sees him fighting them? It doesn't make sense. And so this description of the sleeper agents is either inaccurate or we're missing something important that we have not been told. Right. And if they're doing that to have it be like a big reveal in Phyrexia all will be one or something, I guess, congrats, but also this is the set where they're talking about sleeper agents, so you probably should have just explained it in the set where you talk about sleeper agents instead of 2 sets from now, because don't forget, Brothers War is next, but there probably aren't going to be Phyrexian sleeper agents in Brothers War, since it's just Teferi traveling back in time to be around during the Brothers War.
Yeah.
So...
Because it's a cool thing to be there for.
I am still curious. I'm not writing it off yet. I'm still curious as to why he's going, and I'm still optimistic about the possibilities of the time travel set, but I can absolutely understand why other people would be like, yeah, no thanks, right? I get it. But yeah, I just want answers to the sleeper agent questions, and I feel like they have not been answered, and yet it seems like this Planeswalker's Guide feels like it answered them, and I do not think it did.
Okay.
And then last but not least, let's talk about it.
No, boy.
Okay. In the Benalia section, they mention Aran Capuchin. They mention that Aran Capuchin is a Seren and a leader of House Capuchin, right? It's important. It's important to talk about him. To my knowledge, this is the first time he is mentioned. I'm almost certain this is the first time he has a card, although it's him as a Phyrexian, but still. And as always, anything that we say that is incorrect, you are always welcome to correct us in the comments down below. We're super open to that all the time. But they mentioned those things about him. Now, this article was released... Oh, actually, you know what? I'm so sorry. There is one other thing I need to talk about before I go into this. I apologize for being a tease. I did not do this on purpose. At the top of this article, because this was something we wanted to talk about, and it's rude to not talk about it. At the top of the article, there's an editor's note that mentions that in addition to Roy Graham and Ethan Fleischer, Jenna Helland and Garrett Turner also contributed to this article. And I'm upset that I omitted them in a similar manner, if not worse, than how Wizards did it. Because just because they left the company, right? Because it says before leaving the company, these two also contributed to this article. Just because they left the company, why don't they just get put in the byline?
Right,
and then have
the company doesn't mean you suddenly became not the author of a thing you wrote.
Well, and then have the editor's note be they are referenced in the byline for their contributions despite the fact that they no longer work for the company. Like, but otherwise you're just putting in the editor's note, oh, by the way, these two as well. But when you contract an author, right, you contract them for the work that they perform. And that's it. When that work is done, until they get contracted again, which many have, by the way, but until they get contracted again, they don't work for you anymore. So Jenna Helland and Garrett Turner no longer work for Wizards. But arguably, neither do any of the other authors that have written previous stories for you that have gotten bylines. Martha Wells, who wrote the last Dominaria set of stories. She has not, to my recollection, worked with the company since. She still gets the bylines for having written the story, right? Like, it's not like an editor's note. This was written by Martha Wells, who was a previous contracted employee of Wizards of the Coast. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it just seems really odd. Like, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I just don't understand that aspect of business. I'm not a business major. So I don't fully get it.
I am.
I wasn't going to throw you under the bus to be like, we're saying this, but I'm not, but Amy is. I don't know. I really don't. So if somebody could educate me on that, that'd be great. But if they contributed to it, give them the recognition that they deserve in the actual byline as opposed to an editor's note after the fact. Yeah, it just seemed odd to me.
Up.
Yeah. Anyway, that's, you know.
Maybe that's the way they decided to do it because they didn't want people thinking that old writers were back, because there would be an uproar about old writers being back.
I guess. I don't know.
Because I know I would make an uproar if old writers were back. I'd be like, yes, finally.
Okay, so back to the other point that I was making earlier. Again, please, as always, anything we talked about in the comments down below, we'd love to hear from you. Because this is my big point. This article was released on August 31st of this year, 2022.
Oh, wow. It's been a while.
Yes, but it's been a while since it was released to now, but again, when you cram 10 stories in 8 days, sorry, I can't cover it all at once. You gotta wait, right? Because they aren't willing to give their stories room to breathe, but we are, because we have other things to do, as well as the fact that they deserve their own time and their own videos to review them in. The first main story was released on August 10th. And by that I mean that's the first of all 10 stories, but it's also the first of the main episodic 5 stories. And the last main story, aka the last of the 10 stories as well as the 5, was released on August 18th. So again, like I said, it's within 8 days. That's not what I'm talking about or complaining about here. But yes, the 10th and the 18th were the first and the last. This, pardon my reach, is on the 31st. Right, so well after the release of the first and the last stories. So, and the specific story where we learn that Iran has been completed by the Phyrexians,
right,
was released on August 15th. This article on the 31st, Iran being completed on the 15th. So why is this article written as if it is supposed to precede the stories?
Because it is.
But it never does. It never does.
Nope.
It is always released drastically after the stories come out. Drastically. And while this one would have helped, I think Kaldheim, in my opinion, was much more egregious because it was a newer plane and it was harder to understand things at the time that we were reading the main stories. When we read the Planeswalker's Guide, the main stories made so much more sense.
Yep.
For like geographical understandings and things like that.
We were like, oh, we get it now.
Whereas we were very confused when we were reading the story because you know what? We're in a place that we've never been to before. So at least here with Dominaria, some people would have the help or the benefit of having been here previously. But not everyone. So it would be helpful if your Planeswalker's Guide that described your plane prior to the stories being released could be released prior to the stories being released. I understand, before someone says it, in anticipation of someone saying it, I understand that the Planeswalker's Guide is full of cards.
What?
And instead of pictures.
Oh, okay. I was like, cards in a card game?
In other words, instead of the photos that would be in a typical story,
Yeah.
which would just be the artwork. And so maybe there's something hinky with like the contracts with the artists don't allow them to show just the art that early because it's like too many of the individual artworks or something like that. And especially they wouldn't have shown a Johnny Sleeper agent because they didn't reveal that until the final story was revealed.
Yeah.
Like, so that makes a bit of sense. But you could have shown Banalish Sleeper and not a Johnny, right? It's a common. So, okay, you could have shown that, at least that art. It's not anyone that is of consequence, so you didn't have to show Iran, right? And they didn't in this article show Iran either. They showed Danitha, which again, you could have just shown the art for Danitha. So I don't get it. If you change the cards, the individual cards that would have not been spoiled yet, if this was prior to the stories being released, to the arts themselves instead, then you could have absolutely released this prior to the story and had the ability to give everyone context for what was going on and what was happening. I don't get it. And it's so frustrating.
It really is.
Especially because, right? Because here's the kicker. Especially because when your final article was released on August 18th, later that day, by only a few hours, you reveal that Ajani is the sleeper agent, even though the final story is when you want people to be able to find that out. But you do it in a live stream that everybody is going to watch if they want to hear about all the information for the new set, which you do hours after. And yet, this article that was released half a month after the story where Iran is revealed to be turned into a Phyrexian, and after the cards have been released, you don't talk about the fact that Iran is a Phyrexian, nor do you show the card where Iran is depicted as a Phyrexian. Why? It doesn't make any sense. You don't get both sides of it. If you're writing the article as if it should be read before the stories, then release it before the stories. But if you're writing the article like you don't want people to know what happens in the stories, then don't release it after people know what happened in the stories.
Yeah.
I don't understand it. It's so frustrating. We've been saying it for multiple sets now. Release the Planeswalker's Guide before the stories and put it in your damn story tab so that people can understand the plane that they're reading about. There was nothing, absolutely nothing, revealed in here through text that would have spoiled anything for this story at all.
Yeah, correct.
At all. Through text. The cards, like I said, showed a Johnny sleeper agent. So, yeah, that would have revealed it. But then just don't show that one. Just show the Banalish sleeper, which is a common, so just do that. It's easy, and it's not a named character. It's an unnamed Banalian soldier, or whatever, who is a Phyrexian. Like, it's not that hard.
Right.
I genuinely would love to hear other people's thoughts, because we've said this for such a long time, right? I mentioned Kaldheim.
It's crazy.
Kaldheim might have been the first time that we really talked about it because of the fact that it was just so egregious in Kaldheim. Like, so egregious that I still think about it. I think it's the most egregious example of it, where when the stories were released, we knew nothing about this plane.
Right.
And so we're reading the stories and we're like, wait, what the hell's happening? And then when you read the Planeswalker's Guide, you're like, oh crap, that's what happened,
3 weeks ago.
20 days ago. Yeah, absolutely. So anyway, that was an egregious example of it. But this is another one. It just doesn't make sense to me. If you're talking about Iran, then add the footnote of his daughter Danitha will likely have to take over now that he has been completed by the Phyrexians. Or release this before your stories and you don't have to talk about it, because then that guy that you read about in the Planeswalker's Guide, who's like the head honcho of House Capuchin, has now been turned into a Phyrexian. That's even more of a big deal now.
Yeah.
Because otherwise he's just Raph and Danitha's dad, who we saw that one time in the peace talks, who is now a Phyrexian. And it's not as impactful. But if you know that he is the head of House Capuchin, one of the 7 houses, like, it's a lot bigger of a deal when you're able to read about it in the Planeswalker's Guide first. Since you want it to be that big of a deal, that's why you mentioned it in the Planeswalker's Guide.
I feel like every Phyrexian is a parent.
Okay. Well, Johnny's technically not, but he's like such a mentor figure to so many that like it seems like that. But otherwise, yeah, that's an interesting point. And
is he your mentor?
I mean, I love him. I don't like. Yeah, I guess I could have. I've learned things from him in the lessons that the stories have tried to teach. Not these stories, but some of them. Yeah,
some of them.
Some of them. Again, my favorite story, right? God, I'm not going to remember it. By Chris Latois. I'm not going to remember the name of it, though. But that was in a Johnny story that was phenomenal.
Yeah.
Anyway, we reviewed that story a long time ago. That was from Kaladesh, I believe. Anyway, so that is going to be the end of this particular video. I genuinely, about anything that we talked about, but obviously the bigger points, of course, we would love to hear from you in the comments down below. Because I don't think that asking them to release the Planeswalker's Guide beforehand is that difficult of an ask. I really don't. Like, maybe I'm wrong.
I feel like they write it beforehand, too. I mean, or at least, like, a majority of the details that are in it.
Oh, 100% of the details.
They use that to make the plane.
Yep.
I mean, maybe not for this set because it was a plane that already existed, but most of the time, the Planeswalker's Guide is done first, or everything that's in there is done first.
Yeah, I was going to say, maybe the words aren't in that order yet, but the people who wrote it know all those things well before the set is released. They have to, because as we know about the release schedules for these sets, like, whatever Wizards is working on today as we sit here is stuff that is going to come out in, like, 2025 or something. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and it depends on, there are different departments doing different things at different stages, right? But they work pretty far ahead of the time, which is why they know that Phyrexia All Will Be One is coming after the Brothers' War, and then March of the Machines, and then March of the Machines Aftermath or whatever, and then Eldraine, and then blah, blah, blah. Like, they know all those sets beforehand. Does that mean that every card is created, the whole story is created? No. But they still know that those sets are coming out, so they probably have a general idea at minimum of what that's all going to look like. So yes, I do not believe it would be that difficult, but again, I don't work for the company, I don't have insider knowledge, but if other people do know, based on things that people from the company have said or talked about or whatever, leave it in the comments down below. We would love to hear from you.
Yes.
And let us know where you got your info, because I would love to also get my info from that place. So thank you for the assistance.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that reading a Planeswalker's Guide, understanding a plane, and enjoying the Planeswalker's Guide, but still being able to say, hey, you should have released this sooner so that we could have understood and appreciated your stories better, is actually a really good way for all of you to join us as we show off our...
#Worthos Pride.
That's right. Like I've alluded to previously, I would like to be back here next week for the Legends article. I think it's going to be pretty cool. I think it's something that would be interesting for us to read about. So hopefully, scheduling permitted, we should be back for that. Like I said earlier, if you subscribe and ring that bell, you'll get the notification as soon as that video comes out. We also have opening videos that have been coming out every Monday for the past few Mondays, so tune in for that as well. And obviously, as I mentioned, live every Monday and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern. We would love to have you in our chat. You can come, join us, talk Magic Story, talk your lives, talk good food that you've had recently. We would love to hear any and all of those things. It almost always devolves into food anyway, and or evolves into food. So whatever you would like to bring to the table, we would love to have you.
Yes.
But
yes, bring the food to the table.
Nice, I did not do that on purpose. Very good. But for now, from us here at the Geek for All family of channels, I have been Joe.
And I'm Amy.
And as we always say, in whichever video of ours you watch next, we will see you all next time. Thanks, everybody.